Good morning. Thank you for taking the time to join us for Vandis's webinar with our partner FireMon on how to combat network complexity to enhance security visibility. Today's session will be led by Tim Woods, Vice President of Technology Alliances, and Rick Rodriguez, Sales Engineer for FireMon. Tim will discuss the complexities of today's threat landscape and provide an overview of the FireMon Network Security Posture Management solution. Then Rick will show us a brief demo of the FireMon Policy Manager platform. Joining Tim and Rick today is Ryan Young, Vandis' CTO, who will assist with questions. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A, and we will either address them as we go or at the end of the session. We also have a few polling questions today that we hope you will take part in. And lastly, a quick reminder to visit our website, vandis.com/events, for a list of other upcoming events you might be interested in. For those of you who are new to Vandis, Vandis specializes in optimizing and securing hybrid network infrastructures to achieve maximum value for our clients. With our proven process, anchored by our deep industry knowledge, we deliver solutions and successful outcomes which cultivate strong connections and trust with our customers. For over 40 years, Vandis has delivered comprehensive strategies for secure IT infrastructures. We have partnered with FireMon so that our clients' security teams are empowered with the tools needed to improve visibility across hybrid and multi-vendor IT environments, ensuring that changes and potential risks are quickly identified and mitigated. By attending today's webinar, you should walk away with an understanding of how FireMon's Network Security Posture Management platform automates the management of firewall and cloud security policies to increase visibility, eliminate policy-related risks, streamline rule changes, and meet compliance requirements. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Tim.
Jen, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I want to take a quick moment to thank everybody for joining us today. We clearly recognize you could be doing a million other things with your time, but you chose to spend your time with us this morning. And for that, I am sincerely appreciative. So let's go ahead and jump into it. If you're not familiar with FireMon, which I hope you are, but if you're not, we've been around for quite a while. We actually invented the firewall policy management space way back in 2001. And the key value drivers around that is extended visibility, exactly what you see in the bulleted list down here, helping you to establish continuous compliance. I like to say if you're going to put the time, the effort, and the energy, and you'll hear me say this later on in the presentation as well, then you want to kind of keep it going. Everything we do is real time, and then always keeping an eye on risk. I think job number one today is always trying to minimize risk and keep risk to a minimum that's acceptable by the business. So let's talk about complexity. I argue that complexity is as big an adversary as the bad actors out there. In fact, complexity can be an enabler for the bad actors. It's one of those things that if you don't challenge, if you don't keep an eye on, and it gets away, then big problems can develop. But when I talk about complexity, always keep it in the back of your mind. I'm talking about there's two types of complexity. There is the inherent complexity that you would expect to find in a good security implementation that lives there, and then there's the evil twin brother of complexity, which is unnecessary complexity. And it's the unnecessary complexity that we take exception with, and that if not challenged can lead to bigger problems. And you don't have to necessarily take my word for it. I mean, a very quick Google search or internet search will expose some of the things that are going on. Just this year, it has been a crazy year already in breaches. And I mean, they've just been coming. It seems like the hits just keep on rolling week after week. We've seen these things pop up. And what's interesting about this, of course, these are things that affect both you and me. These are things where we have our information. Take the NPD breach as an example. If you guys are not aware of this, I hope everyone here is aware of it. I would solicit you to go check your put a freeze on your credit reports with the credit reporting agencies, whether that's Equifax or Experian or TransUnion. But this is probably going to go down as the biggest breach in history. There's that much information out there I've already checked it for myself. All my information was in there. Where I lived, where I've been in the past, my social security numbers, all of my information was out there. I checked it for my wife's. Her information was out there. So this is a huge breach. It's a huge amount of data that was exposed, both for even going back to people that are deceased. I mean, it's information that goes back that far. When you think about the magnitude of it, it's really hard to kind of fathom how much information was out there. The tail of a breach, when I talk about the heavy tail of the breach, it's just really the persistence of a breach. How long? There's already in the MPD breach that we just kind of looked at there, there's already 8 to 9, class action lawsuits against Jericho Pictures, which owns MPD. And I'm sure there will be many more. If we go back and look at, Target just a year and a half ago, finished their last kind of litigation from a breach that, happened back in, when was it? 2017, I think, 2016. But so the tail of the breach is persistence. It's not just the once in time and, you're done with it in a year. And it's expensive and it's getting more expensive. It's just the legalities of it and the cost and the reputation and what you have to do to rebuild your brand afterwards and your trust and the confidence that your customers have placed in you. It just kind of goes on and on. The other thing that's interesting about breaches is while there are some highly sophisticated attacks out there, highly sophisticated threats, by and large, most breaches are the result of a simple mistake. It's a misconfiguration, it's human error, it's not patching something, it's not updating something, it's not remediating that vulnerability. It's not a highly sophisticated threat. Now, obviously, I'm not purporting that you go away from a depth and defense strategy. What is it that I have that somebody else would want, and to what extent will they go to get it? Should always be in the forefront of your thoughts as you're working on your security architectures, for sure. But keep in mind, this is what results from complexity, from unnecessary complexity as it gestates within the environment. And so this is where those paths, those open paths can develop for the bad actors and the hackers to take advantage of. And when I talk about unnecessary complexity, this is where I stress the importance of of having to put a face to the name, or having to put a name to the face, regardless of the technology. I put this little list together. Uh, Ryan, you could probably duplicate this, quadruple this list, I'm sure. When we look at the different technologies that are out there, for us, we focus in this area up here. We look at firewalls and SD-WANs, and we look at router ACLs and switch ACLs and load balancer ACL. Everything has almost all of the network technologies out there today have some type of an access control list, have some type of a firewall policy. We start getting into cloud access. You have both, third-party native cloud policies and third-party. But for us, this is the face that we're putting on. This is the face to the name that we're putting on complexity. It's the sheer volume of rules. It's the duplicate rules, the shadowed rules. It's the overly permissive rules that are allowing way more access than what is necessary to meet the needs of the business. It's all as, but for whatever the technology is, you have to identify what is the unnecessary complexity around that technology. And now you know what you need to go and challenge. Now you know what you need to go and create a remediation plan around to try to reduce that unnecessary complexity across your estate. Here's what we know for sure, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Unchallenged, unnecessary complexity will grow, and as it grows, the complexity gap will grow larger. And three things are going to happen, maybe more than three things, but the probability of human error creeping into the equation is going to go up. The probability of risk is going to go up. The probability of human error, misconfiguration, risk, all of that is going to go up if it's not challenged. So we have to challenge it. If I was going to try to draw a picture of this for you to kind of visualize what this unnecessary complexity looks like over time for just this, say, just take a network in general, then I would probably draw something like this. You know, it was when we had a few firewalls or a few with minimal policies, a couple of hundred policies, maybe 300, 400 rules on a firewall. Those were the good days. It's not uncommon for us nowadays to see firewalls with 10,000, 20,000, 40,000 rules, enough rules that it's absolutely impossible to manage it um, without some level of automation, without leveraging some type of automation. And eventually, if you choose not to manage it, I mean, the complexity just gets overwhelming. There's no way that you can humanly analyze policy behavior. There's no way that you can correlate rules between one another, and it just becomes impossible to do it without some form of automation. To make matters worse, we're fighting complexity. We're fighting the challenges of complexity within the environment, but we're also fighting the speed of the business. And I don't really mean fighting the speed in the business, because when I think about business and security, I believe the two should complement each other, and security should be an enabler within the business. But what I've seen is where the speed, the business has accelerated in many times past the ability of the firewall security team or the security team to honor the business requests in the timeline that they expect to, or that the business expects the request to be honored. And when that happens, when you're no longer in parity with the speed of the business, then what happens? The business will try to go around you. And if the business tries to go around you, then we know what's going to happen there. That's when security gaps come into play. And then there's compliance. We always have compliance. Even if you're not mandated by a regulatory compliance initiative, you're still going to have your best practice. You're still going to have standards within your environment that you want to see met. But the teeth, like the teeth of the breech or the tail of the breech, you know, compliance is getting more expensive too. Falling out of compliance can become a very expensive proposition. More importantly, though, I see too often that compliance becomes um, a consumer of time, a consumer of work cycles, where it's almost like a crash diet, right? I mean, we run to get ready for the summer, and then we go back, and what we achieved, is lost, and then we're right back fighting it again. So from a compliance perspective, we have to, if as I said earlier, if you want to become compliant, if you're going to put the time, the effort, the energy, the resources, spend the dollars to become compliant, then we need to find a way to stay there. And that's where continuous compliance comes into play. That's where lifecycle management comes into play. And we'll talk more about that in just a little bit here as well. The consequences of ignoring growing complexity. Gartner said 99% of firewall breaches. They said this 3 years ago. They said it again last year. They're saying the same thing as it applies to cloud configuration controls. And the reality is they've been right. Again, a quick Google search can illuminate this and support what they are what they're predicting here for sure. But obviously the breach being the worst, but there's other consequences of ignoring growing complexity. I would just say it's one of these things that we can no longer afford to ignore because it's growing at such a rapid pace. As the hybrid landscapes continue to expand, change across those hybrid landscapes continue to become more frequent as well. And we're going to talk about how that's kind of how that relationally links as well. It's not easy. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of balls in the air when it comes to policy management. And again, you need a platform. You need some level of automation that's going to give you the behavioral analytics that you need in order to get in front of it. I believe we have a poll. There we go. I think it pops up for the audience here. I'll give everyone just a few minutes to take a look at that and select your answers, and then we'll see what those answers look like. I tried to take a stab at one of the questions, but it told me very quickly that I'm not allowed to do so.
All right, I'm going to end the poll in 3, 2, 1. And I'm sharing the results.
Yeah, it's pretty much all across the board. Those Ryan, is there any surprises there that pop up for you?
No, I mean that pretty much aligns with everything we're seeing. You know, I'm surprised that managing complexity in hybrid cloud environments isn't higher.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Lack in automation, and probably we're going to talk more about that as well, automation and some of the advantages of automation, because that's definitely a biggie. In fact, I mean, there's all kinds of technologies out there to help you, leverage automation across your environment. Firewall security policy management is one of those. Cloud configuration monitoring, God, did I forget to encrypt an S3 bucket? That's happened. Well, you wouldn't think that would happen. You'd think there'd be checks in place to prevent that from happening, but it happens. The next thing you know, the mother load of data is exposed. Discovery across your network, just knowing what it is that you have to protect. It's very hard to protect the unknown. It's very hard to manage those things that you don't know about, yet that's the reality that our IT security professionals are faced with today. Things are being deployed on the networks outside the purview of IT security. And then the IT security people are being held responsible for, protecting those things. So it's very hard. It would be like being a bodyguard and you've been charged to protect an asset. And if you don't know where that asset is, how do you go? How do you protect it? Where are they at? Where are they going? Where have they been? Who's with them? How long will they be there? If the answer to all those questions, I don't know, then what's the probability of being successful in your efforts? So a lot of areas. What I would say is it's not an area where you have to boil the ocean either. It's, identify those areas where you need the most help, and then look what forms of automation are out there that you can leverage to help you. It's I like to say it's being brutally honest with yourself. Where am I at today? Where do I want to go, and how do I stay when I get there? I find today that a lot of folks are in a manual effort still. They're trying to get to dynamic. I'm going to explain dynamic very quickly, but I'm in this manual phase where I'm still using spreadsheets and emails to track changes. I'm using an ITS system, maybe it's ServiceNow, and I'm trying to make those things all correlate. And it's just from a scalability perspective, it's a bit of a chore in and of itself. Dynamic is where we start looking at things in real time, right? The downside to dynamic is it's already happened, right? So I detect a change that tells me that I broke something, but at least I'm able to detect that change, analyze that change, and understand that there's a potential problem that I need to go off and remediate. So it's not a bad place to be, and it's the next step that I would encourage people to try to get to, but it's a place where it's already happened, and now we have to remediate. The last part, of course, or the last piece where we ultimately want to be is proactive, so that we can start looking at proposed changes in advance of implementation in the context of the policies that they're destined for, and analyze those prior to implementation so that we know that we're not going to do harm or cause harm in advance. So where are we at today? Where are we going? And when we get there, how do we stay there? And what I would offer is that for these type of efforts, that you look at a prescriptive process. I put this one together. It's just, it's a typical prescriptive process for cleaning up a policy that maybe it's a legacy policy that's kind of bloated over time, and maybe it has a lot of unused rules and shadowed rules and duplicate rules and overly permissive rules and things of that nature. And then, at the end of it, of course, what's important to note there is life cycle management. Again, if you're putting the time, the energy, the effort, the money into it, then you want to be able to stay there. It's the end of that. It's part of that security journey for sure. It's all about, with effective policy management, it's about reducing risk. I said at the first here that, job one is to reduce risk to a level that's acceptable by the business. We have to be able to manage change. I'm going to talk about that and enforce compliance in a continuous manner. Get on top of compliance so that when a change happens, we're able to analyze that change and apply compliance to it. So what I would say here is, when we talk about visibility, when I hear CISOs and I hear security directors talk about, I've made these investments in the technology, but I still don't have the high level of confidence that I want to, that I'm getting the return out of that investment, it usually boils back to lack of visibility. It's the number one thing that we hear. And visibility is directly tied to change. When a change happens, and as I said, in these hybrid environments, these large growing hybrid environments that we have today, change is happening more frequently. There's really one question that has to be answered. When that change takes place, you have to be able to detect that change and know that a change has taken place. And by the way, there's not any regulatory compliance initiative out there that doesn't ask you if you're monitoring for change, right? Are you analyzing your log data? Are you monitoring your log data? Things of that nature. But that question is, did that change do harm? Yes or no? Did that change have a negative impact to my compliance posture, my security posture? Did that change have a negative impact to my business continuity posture? And so we're going to bring another poll question in here. I'll be very interested to see how you guys answer this one, as it's related directly to visibility across your environment. How confident are you in your organization's ability to detect security policy changes in real time?
And Tim, I think this is an important one because if you look at, 30% of the breaches last year, they happened from either policy or patching misconfigurations on your edge firewalls. So it's really important to know when these changes are happening.
It is, and looking at a change an hour later or 2 hours later or a day later is it can be very detrimental too. So real time, the emphasis here is definitely on being able to analyze change across. And it's not a trivial task. I'm not trying to imply that it's a trivial task, because it's definitely not.
Okay, we are sharing the final results of this second poll.
Yeah. I like the 17% one. Very confident we have robust real-time detection in place. I love that. So kudos to you guys. Not confident, we see that a lot. Unsure, we see that a lot. Somewhat confident, we see that a lot too. So those align, Ryan. Those align with my expectations for the most part. How about you?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think there's right. It all depends on what you put in is what you get out. So I think I was surprised. I would say that I expected the not confident to be a little bit higher. But otherwise that largely aligns from what I hear from customers in the field.
Excellent. Again, guys, that's the question. That's the one question related to visibility and change is, did the change do harm? Yes or no? And yes or yes. And so you want to be able to answer that. FireMon sets in the middle. We set in the middle and we monitor all that. We recognize we're not the center of the universe, although I'm trying to depict that here, but we're definitely not. We want to play into the environment that you already have established. But we want to monitor those firewalls. We want to monitor the SD-WAN, everything that has a policy from ground to cloud. Everything has a policy on it today from ground to cloud. And trying to get your arms around managing all those policies without jumping around from 17 different platforms can be a challenge in and of itself. So monitoring your firewalls, whether you're a single vendor or multi-vendor, monitoring the SD-WAN. If you're embracing SASE today, there's policies there. Again, there's native cloud security implementations that have policies, whether it's the network security groups or it's your VPCs or it's your native cloud firewalls or your third-party inserted firewalls. They're all it's all in there. So how do I bring all of those back together? And then you have your third-party tools. If you're leveraging ServiceNow or you're leveraging a SOAR or a SIEM, then you want to be able to ensure that you have a strong API that can help you exchange information between those other technologies as well, so that you can effectively and you'll hear me say this again, but you can effectively raise the total value of your combined security solutions by being able to readily exchange information and enrich those other technologies that you're using through integrations. And so we achieve this by monitoring these devices that you see here across the environment, and we bring all of these policies back into a common repository. And when we store them in the policy repository, we apply a schema. We normalize them so that all of the security policies for us look the same. And so that way I don't have to have 80 different behavioral analytics engines. I don't have to have 60 different correlation engines. I need one. And then but we can do those things. We can correlate. We can look at behavioral assessment of the policy. We can look at changes over time. We can run assessments as change happens in real time. So when that change takes place, we can run an assessment against that change. I can do the differential comparison when I see a change, and Rick will highlight some of this for you when he walks through the demo. But I can look at, here's my old policy, here's my new policy, what changed, extract that delta and give you the who, the what, the when, the where, all the details of that change. But then follow that up with an assessment, whether it's PCI or FISMA or HIPAA or GDPR or whatever it happens to be, NERC, SIP, NIST. Run those assessments against it so I can also answer that question. Did we break compliance? Did we do something that hurt the environment? Did we do something that's impacted business continuity? So running those assessments is going to answer many of those questions for you as well. We bring all this information in and then we put it, again, Rick is going to highlight some of this for you when he walks through the demo, but we bring it in and put it in a common lens. So you have a single place to look at the key security performance indicators across your environment to know at a glance, is everything okay? Are we doing the right things, and are we moving the needle in the right direction as we're looking at some of the detail around our security metrics? And so that's how we summarize all this information. It's important to note that we don't put anything in the dashboard. We don't put anything in a widget or a chart that you can't immediately drill down into. So any of these bar charts that you see here, if it was a pie chart or whatever it happens to be, as we're showing you some of the statistical elements within the dashboard, if I was to click on this, then it would drill right down into it. The boxes that you see circled up here, if I was to click on these, it would pull up. It says I have 1,148 redundant rules. If I clicked on this, it would pull up those 1,148 rules and show me exactly what they were. If I clicked on the unused rules or the unreferenced objects, it would immediately take me to that area and show me that information that it's referring to within the graph. So very actionable dashboards so that you have actionable intelligence necessary to build a remediation off of as quickly as possible. So I'm going to finish up here. I'm going to leave you with this, and then Rick's going to jump into the demonstration. And while I'm applying this to the network security policy management platform kind of as a must-have, I would say that you could apply this to almost any technology out there. But job one is and step one is it has to perform within your environment. It has to scale to the size of the environment. If it can't scale to the size of the environment, then you're kind of lost. Doesn't matter how good everything else is, because you're going to fail to recognize the return on the security investment that you're looking for if it doesn't scale to the size of the environment. As we kind of stressed earlier, real time is so critically important nowadays. Finding things and cutting bad actors off and cutting misconfigurations off and cutting errors off as they happen is becoming more paramount within these large hybrid expanding environments that we have today. Again, I said I recognize FireMon is not the center of the universe. We have to be able to fit within your environment very nicely. We have to be customizable. We have to honor your processes that are in place and work in harmony with those. If you're storing data, and again, this is true for any technology that grabs your data and stores it for any length of time, you need to have access to that data, and it needs to be very quick access. You need to be able to query it. You need to be able to get the responses back as quickly as possible. we use Elasticsearch. We pre-index a lot of the information, so it just comes back within seconds, definitely not minutes. But being able to search that repository of information, build, because the canned reports just aren't going to cover everything for your needs. So you need to be able to create your own reports. You need to be able to modify and customize your assessments if necessary, and all that to get the correct access to that information. And then last but certainly not least, there has to be a strong commitment to a robust API within the platform. Our platform, I would say close to over 90%, probably over 95% of the functionality in the platform is exposed via the API. We definitely consider ourselves an API first company. And again, it's because we do the amount of integrations that we do, but we also want to be able to enrich the other systems that are out there and exchange information, as I said earlier, to raise the total value of your combined security solutions that you have. Anyway, I hope that was helpful, everyone. I hope that provided some insight for you. Rick, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and let you give everyone just a glimpse of what the platform, a picture paints 1,000 words, so they can see what the platform looks like.
Certainly. Thank you, Tim. And while I'm bringing up my screen, I'll introduce myself. My name is Rick Rodriguez, Senior Sales Engineer with FireMon, going on about 5 years. So I've seen quite a bit out there. My goal here in the next 10 minutes or so is to just kind of bring to life what Tim was talking about, bring it in words, a little teaser here. You guys confirm, yeah, I am sharing my screen, right? Seeing over your dashboard.
We see it.
See it, cool. All right, so yeah, like I said, 10 minutes here, just a little quick teaser, what Tim was talking about, FireMon, what he was talking about, the space NSPM, network security policy management. So those devices with the ACLs, the routers, the switches, the firewalls, your management stations, the cloud, SASE, SD-WAN, all that stuff, that's the space we live in, okay? And what he was talking about a lot with unnecessary access, unnecessary risk, and complexity, visibility, that's what we're getting at here, right? Everything here is around risk. How do we mitigate it? How do I identify it, clean it up, attack it, right? So that's what I'm hoping to get through here in this demo. So first things first is that visibility piece, okay? Yeah, I mentioned the space we live in. This is that single source of truth, that single pane of glass, if you will, where you can see everything. You don't have to log into your different devices to be able to get information. It's all going to live here. We get this information typically by logging in via the API and pulling the configs. There's a service account on these devices. Usually when there's a change made, that's our trigger to log in. That's that real time, that continuous monitoring. So what you see here on my screen should be the exact same things that are out on the devices. But when we go log into those devices and we pull the configs back, we're getting a lot of data. We tend to focus a lot on security rules, but there's a lot more to it. All the objects, and depending on device types, categories, profiles, interfaces, routes. There's a lot we can do with this stuff. We can get into topology and map the network, access path, how things flow through the network, even allows us to help plan and automate changes, right? Because we know how things are flowing through the network. But when we go get this data, it comes back and we take it all, and like Tim mentioned, it goes to a process called normalization where we put it into a FireMon schema. So now all of those rules are going to look the same. You don't need to be a Palo expert or an AWS expert or anything to understand what a rule looks like, because this is the schema that it's going to be applied, right? And you see, I'm looking at my entire enterprise, all my rules, it's all right here in one place. And one of the immediate things that we can do is just what's out there, right? Can I query? I don't have to do this now in a spreadsheet or a Google Doc or anything like that. I can just say, anything within the rule. Am I passing traffic, or show me all my rules that are passing traffic on some random port out there? And does that traffic originate from certain source zones, or is it hitting certain destinations, or I only care about accepts? These queries are very powerful, one, in just helping me find what's out there. But also these queries can start to become like a golden config, like a standard, right? If you're never going to allow 140 from some certain zone, right, let's put that in there. Let's capture those rules and bring them to our attention and flag them so we know what we have to go attack and mitigate, right? In addition to just being able to see all the rules and objects and everything, all these things get normalized into the same schema like this, we'll help you with the metadata as well. Again, this is something that you might be capturing in a different tool, in a different place, but we're going to bring it all in. So all these fields are customizable. but helping with thinking of the ACL lifecycle, right? Who owns a rule, or why was that rule put in here, or who's it in here for? When do I need to review it again, right? Whether that's regulatory, like a PCI, I have to review these things, or I just want to, after 6 months, make sure this rule is still needed. Capture inside of here why the rule is here, anything that just helps you with that life cycle, right? So now that I've explained kind of how the data comes in and we've normalized it, really what we're doing is setting the table here for the rest of the analytics. And I usually go left to right here talking about change, cleanup, compliance. So let's just start with change. So as has been mentioned, we're going to capture everything. Somebody makes a change on a device or something makes a change on a device, we're going to see it. It's going to trigger a message that tells us to log in and pull that. And of course, you want to see what's going on in your environment. You have complex, maybe a lot of people are touching it. It's okay. But you want to see what's going on. We're going to capture who is doing it, what they're doing, when they're doing it. And these changes, these configs, they're small text files, and we can save these things basically forever, right? As long as storage is allocated, or set your own retention policy, that's fine. But what that does is allow us to go in there and have that audit history. I can compare configs and so say, show me everything that's changed between this date and this date. We've got that list. Or I want to go back further in time. Maybe a user says this worked for me last year. Show me everything that's changed, and I can go back and figure out, maybe what's blocking that or anything now, right? Point is, we're going to see this all. We're going to capture this data. It's here for you. This is I'm doing it in the GUI. You've got it via reports, and those reports can be scheduled. They can be automated. You can capture changes made outside of Windows and everything if that's what you care about, making sure people are doing the right things at the right time. But we're going to be aware. Point of this is just awareness, kind of like a control over the environment. That then leads into cleanup, right? Easy cleanup. We see these changes as they come in. We're going to run it through, like Tim showed a screen similar to this. What's that low-hanging fruit? Where can we just, we care about hygiene, we care about conciseness, we care about efficiencies. These are compute devices. So where can we go out right now and start cleaning things up? And we're going to show you all the redundant rules. And I said we focus on rules a lot, but same thing with objects. I show you where you have unused objects, orphaned objects, all the things that you can clean up. Low hanging, like I said, easy type opportunities, get some quick wins. In addition to all that in the GUI, will help you consolidate, give you recommendations on where, by adding an object or adding an IP or something, we can consolidate some rules, and also help you even reorder those rules. We care about efficiencies, that type of stuff. And we've got all your normal reports, duplicates, rule usage, that type of stuff. Traffic flow is very helpful. We tend to come across any's overly permissive when we're doing cleanup. A traffic flow report will actually break down all the flows in a rule and tell you everything that's actually happening in here. So the number one flow on this rule, it's just some network, some DNS, right? Maybe that becomes a different rule, or look at the one underneath it, right? This is a web server or an application server. Maybe I break that out of this overly permissive rule, this any here, and it becomes its own rule, right? So there's intelligence here and not just calling out these things, but how can I actually go and action some of these things? And then, I talk about low-hanging fruit, easy cleanup. Compliance is really like an advanced cleanup thing, right? We mentioned the word compliance, and a lot of times people default to the regulatory stuff, the PCIs and the HIPAAs and stuff of the world. And there are a lot of organizations that doesn't apply to, or that's just not part of your team. There's another team that handles compliance. So people kind of, get turn off when I mention compliance. And then you get into the CIS, the NIST, the ISOs of the world. Okay, all right, we get it. Best practices is stuff we aspire to. But compliance is also your internal best practices. The stuff that you care about. This is I never want network A to talk to network B. I never want RDP on my network, right? We must never interrupt this critical service, no matter what we do. Don't do anything that would block this, right? All that stuff falls under compliance as well. And that's where it becomes very powerful, because the analogy here is you're driving your car down the road and you got to stay between the lines. Well, it's the same thing with your network, right? These are your guardrails. These are your baselines on how you want your network to operate, right? And if you define that, now we're going to be able to call out the rules that are out of bounds. These are those misconfigurations. This is where the bad things happen because you have rules there that are allowing traffic you don't want. That all starts with controls, right? We've got thousands of controls that we ship with, and chances are if you're looking for something, we have it. And if you don't, we can duplicate these, we can edit these. You can even create your own controls if you want. Those controls roll up to these assessments. This is what people are generally familiar with. Create your own best practices, use the ones that we ship with, because now when we go grab that change, right? A change is made on the device. We're going to grab it. We're going to normalize it. We're going to log it. We're going to run it through the easy cleanup wizard. We'll also run it through those assessments. And this is where forevermore, continuous compliance, we're going to say, okay, here are the rules right now that you have flagged, right? Let's go do something with these. And when we get into automation, we can even tell you ahead of time, right? You're going to push this rule. It's going to violate these controls that you said are important to you. And there's a wealth of information here. I'm not going to go through all of this. We can do this in a deeper demo, but a lot of ways to look at this information via trends. Tim talked about, are we introducing changes that are improving or decreasing our security posture, right? I happen to be in the green here. We're doing the right thing. But I can look at this as worst rules in my environment, types of controls I'm failing, severity of controls, take me right to those rules, to those devices, or just worst rules in my environment by cumulative score, right? Overly permissive, you would expect that to be a pretty bad rule. Lots of ways to look at this, or you can look at it by reports. Again, these reports could all be run right now ad hoc. They could be scheduled to be delivered in the future, or just drill. If PCI is the most important thing in your world and you want to start with those critical rules, drill down right into them, right? We'll bubble that stuff up to the top for you and help you identify these things. These alerts can be automated. Soon as somebody introduces something that violates a control or does something to your assessment scores, we can have alerts, we can have tickets generated, reports, emails sent out. Now, how do you want to ingest this information? How do you want to consume it? We can assist with that. So, like I said, that was a quick overview, just meant to be a little teaser. There are certainly more use cases around, topology, automation, rule review, recertification, attestation type stuff. But just wanted to bring to life a little bit of what's been talked about so far. But at this point, right now, I think, I don't know if there's any questions. I'll turn it over to Joanne.
Thank you so much, Rick. So again, if you do have questions, you can type them in the Q&A panel of the platform. And we did have something come over in the registration process. If you can go into quickly how FireMon is deployed. And I'm not sure if that goes to you or Tim or you, Rick.
Yeah, I'll touch on it right quick, and then Rick can definitely amplify if I miss something. But that's a great question. FireMon, it's very flexible in the manner in which you deploy it. It can be deployed on-prem within your environment, but it lends itself well to being distributable as well. And I'll hit just a second on the scalability here, but first it virtualizes very well, so it can be deployed on your own cloud instance as well. So whether that's AWS or Azure or whatever it happens to be, as a VM or as a native AWS AVI, whatever you want it to be, AMI, whatever you want it to be. There's three main components to the platform. There's the database, there's the application server, and then there's something called a data collector, which is what actually talks to the devices out there that we're monitoring. And those can reside on a unified instance or a unified platform, or they can be split apart. You can have the database separate from the application server. You can load balance the application server. You can have as many data collectors. There's no cost for the data collector, so you can have as many as you want. As you distribute that across the environment, typically the data collectors are located closest to the devices that are being monitored in the source of log generation. One of the things that I didn't really explain earlier is how we get the real-time information, and we monitor the log data coming from the different devices that you're asking us to monitor. And when I say that we're monitoring the log data, we're actually parsing that log data real time. We're not keeping the log data So when we're done with our analysis of the log data, we purge it. So we're not trying to be a SIM. We're not trying to, you're not going to need some crazy amount of storage to maintain all that log data, but we parse the log data real time. And from that, we're extracting hit counts against rules, hit counts against objects. This is the telemetry. This is how we develop that telemetry inside the tool all real time. We're looking at who's talking to who. But most importantly, we're looking for anything that would be an indication of change. And that's what triggers us to go out and initiate a retrieval of the policy and bring that in, normalize it, and then do that differential comparison of the old to the new. We do that by parsing the log data real time across the devices that you're allowing us to monitor. But yeah, it's incredibly flexible and can deploy almost in any manner you want it to that fits your environment. Rick, did I miss anything there?
No, no, you got it. I mean, it doesn't change the functionality or the licensing or anything. It's really what works for you and your environment and how you want to deploy it.
All right, the next question I have is, I know that a few of our customers on the call today have distributed environments where they're not leveraging either FortiManager or Panorama. Can FireMon still function in environments where those firewall management platforms aren't in place?
That's a great question. Really good question. We can talk directly to the endpoint firewall. We can also talk directly to the manager. If we have a manager in place, it's always nice to be able to talk directly to the manager using the vendor's API calls and aligning with their prescribed methods of communication and interaction with their platforms. So we always try to align, with the vendor's methodology that they've depicted on how you should interface with their platforms whenever possible. But yeah, if there's not a centralized management platform present for whatever that vendor happens to be, we can talk discreetly to the individual security enforcement points themselves.
Okay, that's awesome. So the next big thing there's two things, right? So I saw you had Azure, GCP, AWS. And we've often seen a lot of complexity in how customers are managing those native cloud firewalls, cloud ACLs, NACLs, like whatever platform you're using in their name. Can you talk a little bit about are you saying those are also correlated into the platform so that you have a unified policy in the public cloud?
Yeah, I'm going to let Rick touch on that. He may be able to even show you what to visualize that. I don't know if you have some cloud
Yeah,
construct on the platform. You can show that. But the short answer, Ryan, is yes. Those get visualized in the same manner as the security policies and are brought into the platform the same way.
Yeah, so when we're talking about the cloud, there's really two pieces. There's like a native firewall piece, like an Azure native firewall, which is a firewall construct. And there's also like the VNets and the VPCs. VPCs on Google and AWS, VNets on the Azure side. That's really what we care about. That's kind of like the firewall terminology. And from there, we'll normalize NSGs, SGs as security rules. When we look at this, and I'm showing an Azure on my screen, AWS, and they're going to be very similar. We're going to show you a lot of the information, the instance itself, and what's important here is what's protecting it. Right? What do I have out there that's protecting it? And then I can come over here to my policies and kind of see the same thing. I've got these NSGs out there and stuff. Are they actually protecting anything? What are they protecting? What do those rules look like? And I go down to the rule level, and now those same use cases apply across the board, right? I want to make sure I'm not allowing bad traffic. I don't have overly permissive rules. I'm same use cases. I want to see when changes are made. Are we still compliant and everything like that? So absolutely, whether it's an on-prem traditional device, if it's a cloud device, it all comes down to those ACLs. Are they doing what I want them to do? Am I monitoring them for changes? Or am I doing what I need to do to reduce the risk and complexity in my environment?
I think what's important to point out here also, when you look at this is the same. This is exactly when Rick was on the firewall rules, some of the other firewall rules and stuff. I think he had a Fortinet up there earlier and a Cisco. It looked just like this, right? So you're looking at the same way that the information is formatted. So it's definitely unified. If you look at the little bubbles, you see the different colored little circles up there. You see a red one and an orange and a yellow and a green there. That's additional metadata that's embedded within the rule there too, showing you failed controls. And so if you wanted to see a particular failed control, you would just click on that bubble and it would bring that failed control up immediately and show you what that is relevant to that rule. So a lot of the information, a lot of metadata embedded within that. So again, you're never more than a click away from getting to the underlying information that's so important to each one of those rules when there is when you're trying to do a cleanup on the rule, or in this case, there's a critical control failure that needs to be addressed as soon as possible.
Awesome. So I think we have one last question, and then we're gonna need to wrap it up. But the presentation mentioned several times in graphics network scanners feeding context into FireMon. Can you talk to a little bit about that and how that would affect the security manager?
So are we talking about vulnerability scanners, Ryan?
Yeah,
Just to be
the
clear. Yes.
vulnerability
Yeah.
scanners.
Yeah, absolutely. You can actually, we have the ability to ingest vulnerability scan data. And to kind of simplify it a little bit, essentially we take that vulnerability scan data and we just overlay it onto the policies. And so it allows us to then do things like, hey, do I have any rules that are allowing access to a known vulnerability within my environment? So that's one point. We have a risk analyzer module, which takes that a step further and allows us, so when we grab the information, I'll back up just a second. When we grab the policy information, we also grab, or we try to retrieve as much route intelligence as we can as well from the devices that we're monitoring, that the customer is allowing us to monitor, that they desire for us to monitor. So we bring that route intelligence back as well. And we use that route intelligence along with the compensating controls to try to build a real-time depiction of the network topology. And so in Risk Analyzer, we can actually do a threat scenario where we map out if a bad actor was to come in a well-known threat entry point, how far could that bad actor get? How far could they get? And what known vulnerabilities, right? We always have vulnerabilities on the network. You can't patch everything and then they pop up and there's new ones and it's a never ending, it's a vicious circle. But where are those known vulnerabilities on our network, and are they exploitable? Yes or no? Where do I need to patch, or where do I need to instantiate a rule that would prevent access to that known vulnerability? But the real question is, I have vulnerabilities on my network. Can they be exploited? Can somebody reach them from a well-known threat entry point? Yes or no? And then being able to visualize that becomes the important part of that. Rick, I'll let you tail off on that.
I think you got it right. I mean, we have the policy information, like Tim was saying, we have the routes and the ACLs and everything. That vulnerability data, you layer it on top, and it's a really good another data point to say what rules are actually exposing these vulnerabilities right now. What do I need to go clean up at this very moment? That's allowing these exposures and that type of stuff. So it's just really good to understand, again, where's my risk, and how do we mitigate some of these things, just like we do with the compliance and all of this. We're calling this stuff out, saying, hey, there's a gap here, there's a hole, let's do something about it.
Okay, great. Well, if there are no more questions, Ryan and I would like to thank Tim and Rick for their presentation of FireMon's network security posture management solution. We would also like to thank you for joining today's session. We hope you found the information insightful. We invite you to join us again on October 16th for a deeper dive of the Firewall Policy Manager platform in a Tech in 20 demo. We are also offering participants today a trial of FireMon Policy Analyzer tool, which I will send more information about later today. And a last reminder to visit vandis.com/events for other events that you might be interested in. If you have any other questions from today's session, you can reach out to us at info@vandis.com. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day.